That's fine. That's now, yeah, a brief synopsis there that Jim has put up there. Yeah, I'm here for a number of capacities, really, because I've got a lot of background in running international businesses. I've spent a lot of time in Asia and in the Middle East and in America, running businesses around the world for public companies and private companies, and risk is a common theme. And one of the simulation today is about oil and gas, which I've worked in. I've also worked in financial services with being chairing a company called Affinity, which had a very large amount of risk involved. So risk has really been something that I've been managing through my career. Currently, I'm the CEO of YUDU Sentinel, and YUDU Sentinel is really about delivering better tools and really advanced tools to help us manage crisis in a much better way, particularly with emphasis on how we communicate, because that's always where it fails in crisis. Okay, so that's a bit about me.
Hi everyone. Yeah, Chris Phillips,
Yeah, Chris.
Former head of the National Counterterrorism Security Office a little while ago now, but with that came 30 years of policing experience right across the board, including some large stadiums that I looked after, both as bronze, silver and gold at different times. Those included Twickenham Stadium and Wimbledon Tennis. You might have heard of those. But really, since after 9/11, I started working much closer into counterterrorism, and I became head of the National Counterterrorism Security Office. And that team works, and you may have heard of them again because there's been a renaissance recently. They try to help business understand terrorism and what that means for businesses and individuals. I retired 9 years ago. It's a little bit inaccurate, that briefing, because I don't currently provide consulting services to those companies, but I have done over the last 8 or 9 years. And what I find is that many businesses really haven't done enough to look after their crisis management, to think through their security, and actually what they would do if an incident happened. So I've worked a little bit with Richard at YUDU to try and help refine some of the tools that he's got to make them work specifically for the business community.
Excellent, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. Well, just before we get underway, we have someone from Chichester and someone from Greenford. That's Alison and Janet there. So, all right, let's get the show on the road here and start our terror simulation exercise. The time is 10 a.m. It's Thursday, and everybody present works for this organization, an organization called, fictitious, I hasten to add, called Buzz Worldwide, and it's quite a controversial multinational involved in oil and gas, plastics and palm oil. The firm is a particular target of environmental activists. 6 months ago, a massive oil spill at one of their rigs on the Niger Delta caused widespread pollution, making land uninhabitable and killing wildlife. Buzz Worldwide had to pay out $200 million to local inhabitants to make good what they had done there, the oil spill there. Now, the Buzz HQ is on Gresham Street, close to the Bank of England in the financial district of London, and around 25% of staff, that's around 40 people, are present at the HQ, and the rest are working remotely. Most of them are indeed working from home. Now, you've all just changed jobs. It may not be the job you want, but everyone present is currently part of Buzz Worldwide's crisis management team. So that's kind of set the story for you. You're all working for this slightly controversial oil and gas company. And you're all part of the crisis management team. So we're going to start the simulation now. And the first inject, as we call them in these kind of simulations, is from security. And security is saying, we've received an urgent message from police telling us to lock down our building as an incident is underway at Bank Tube Station. The incident appears to be terror related. The immediate area of the Bank of England is being cordoned off. And I might just say here that it might just be worth you taking some screenshots of these injects, just in case you need to refresh your memory about what has happened. But there's some kind of there's some kind of terror incident taking place at Bank tube station, which is very close to where you are located. And here's a map. Obviously, lots of you won't be familiar with central London geography, but there's Bank tube station. It's a major intersection in London's financial district. And if you go due north of there, virtually due north, you walk up, as I've done many times, up Princes Street, where you meet Lothbury and Gresham Street, and Buzz Worldwide's HQ is right on the junction of Gresham Street and Coleman Street. So that's where you are. And Alison is already asking about the size of the cordons and so forth. And I think I'm going to, not right this second, but I'm going to ask Chris Phillips about that, because he's going to know about that, but we'll come to that in a minute. So that's the basic information that you know now. Your HQ is located not far from where a terror incident is taking place. And throughout this simulation, I'm going to be launching some polls to get some opinions from you. And, you know, there's not always one absolutely right answer on these polls, but this is really what I'm trying to do here, is kind of spark discussion. So I'm going to launch the first poll. And you can see here what the suggestions I've given you as to which teams should take charge, which are the senior management team, which is what we might call gold, the HR team, the tactical team, which we might call silver, comms, or facilities and building security. So I'd like you to vote on this, please, now. Vote on this poll. So, okay. And we're getting okay, 50% of people have voted. If more people, the more the merrier, is what I would say. So who should take charge now? Okay, I'm going to we're up to 70%, up to 80%. Okay, last dibs on this. Who should take charge? Okay, I'm about to close the poll now. Any more? Okay, I'm going to close the poll. And I'm going to show the results, which you should be able to see now. So, Richard, turning to you, can you see the results up there?
Yes, I can, Jim. I can.
And I think it's quite interesting. So you got 43% silver and 25% gold. Oh, actually, and 30. Okay, it's fairly evenly split. What would your comment be on that, please?
Well, I think that, well, my pick would have been the tactical team, for the reasons that the information was that it carried the word that this was a suspected terrorism attack. If it was purely some disruption, like just a demonstration or something, then probably it would be facilities and building security. But I think the attachment of the label of terrorism means that we need to actually start to get the tactical team involved, and that would be my pick from that particular one. But you know, I think those three areas. Fortunately, nobody's contacting the HR team at this moment, nor the comms team, and that's sensible, particularly. But my pick would be for silver.
Chris, any thoughts on this? I mean, Alison is already asking about the size of the cordons. If you could comment on both the poll and the cordons, that would be very, very valuable, please.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. What I would say is that there's no straightforward and right answer to this. Having been gold, silver, and bronze for the police, and the Met Police actually set up this system, this whole gold, silver, and bronze system. And you need to understand really that the gold system is really about strategic. I remember running many rugby matches at Twickenham Stadium, and the goal commander was not even, sometimes he wasn't even in the country. They only had to be available on the phone. The silver really is about tactical and choosing the tactics that they want to use. And bronze, and it's not mentioned here, but effectively the facilities and building security people would be bronzes. And they're the people that are actually doing it at each given site. So in this scenario that we've got so far, it's interesting because you've got some pretty hard information. And the one point I'd make is any incident like this, you would have so much misinformation, and it would be chaotic. So let's think at this moment. I would consider that somewhere between the facilities and building security and the tactical team, they need to be taking control of the situation and start making some decisions. And talking about cordons, the issue with this is it's a moving incident. So it kind of depends where the incident is at any given time, where the police will be looking to put in the cordons.
Okay, fine. Can I just ask, Chris, can I just ask you one point? You made a point to me before we started on this about leadership. You know, how do you get people to take responsibility in a situation like that? Is there likely to be like a power struggle or a power vacuum? I mean, is this something you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, and it's not always the people that you would expect to take control of any given situation. And I think where you've got big buildings in big cities, there's always a mix-up as to who's in control. Whether it's the security of the building, whether it's just the local police officer that's standing outside your building, maybe, or whether it's the individuals that may be the facilities managers and things who have got their own plans and maybe and often don't have the full plans for the building. So it's always a difficult thing. But the whole point of running these exercises is for people to go back to their business and to think through, how would we do this?
Yeah, absolutely. What Ian is saying here, SOPs, standard operating procedures, would dictate what the lower tiers do, and I guess that's absolutely right. Okay, let's move on, because we only have an hour today, and we're moving on to the, I just need to hide the results. So we have now a breaking news story which contains some more information for you, which you need to get across. So a terror attack is underway in the City of London. 3 armed men emerging from Bank Tube Station shot and killed 3 passers-by. Eyewitnesses claim others are injured. Armed officers, that's police officers, who were on the scene in moments, opened fire, and one of the gunmen fell to the ground. There are unconfirmed reports that he was about to detonate explosives strapped to his chest. The 2 other shooters escaped and are on the run close to the Bank of England. Police are telling the public to get off the street and on no account to approach the gunman. Fortunately, because of the effects of coronavirus, not many pedestrians were present. The immediate vicinity has been locked down, with Threadneedle Street, Lombard Street and Princess Street all closed. The tube network has been shut. And a comment from a former police officer, Nigel Fowles, said he was surprised that terrorists had struck, as workers are still largely absent from central London. But he says even though the terror threat has receded, there's always someone out there who has a grievance. So I'm just going to give you a moment. You might want to take a screenshot of that. The major facts are that there are 3 terrorists. One has been shot by police. 2 others have escaped. So there's quite a big terror incident building now. Okay, and I'm just going to, a couple of questions have come in. Okay, I'm going to come to that in a minute. All right, so get across that, and I'm now going to launch my next poll, which is all about a strategic objective. Perhaps actually I should leave that, I'll leave that information up on the screen for you. The next poll I want to launch is about a strategic objective. Crisis management best practice is to set a strategic objective at the beginning of any particular, any kind of major incident. So we want you to think about what your strategic objective is. Would you communicate with stakeholders, safety of your staff and visitors, account for all your staff, or protect your business? So I'm now going to, okay, where am I? Here I am. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to launch a poll here. So here you go. So please, could you vote on this poll to set your strategic? So this is basically what your objective is right through this crisis, right through to the other end. What would your strategic objective be? Now, you might not think that any of those are right, and I'm happy to take suggestions about that. So 60% of people have voted on this, on what your objective is. So please, a few more votes. A few more votes, if you will, please. 80% of people have now voted. I think I'm going to close the poll just to, okay, people are still voting. Anymore, we're stuck at 84. I'm going to close the poll and I'm going to show the results now. So here we go. And Richard, I'm going to turn to you here. So, okay, no surprise there, I think. I hope you can see the results. If you'd like to comment on that, please.
No, I think there's no surprise there, and I'm very pleased to see that 74% are about staff and visitors. And I think that's the number one priority. And of course, you said in your discussion just then, is that this has got to be a strategic objective throughout this whole project or this whole incident. That's always a slight tricky one, because right now, what we know so far is that safety of the staff and visitors will be paramount, and that of course will travel right the way through. But we will find other major issues start pressing against that, and it'd be interesting, Jim, just to get your views about that. If we set that at the beginning, then clearly we'll end up, if we've managed to nail that safety of staff and visitors, then we'll have a number 2 or number 3. There'll be things that start creeping up the list of things we should also add to that objective. Or how would you handle that?
Okay. I mean, I think with a strategic objective, you really need, that needs to be set for the whole. So it depends. If a situation completely changes, then you would change your strategic objective. But the idea with it is that it doesn't change, that it should last throughout the crisis. And I think it's quite right. I think something along the lines of safety of staff and visitors is basically your strategic objective, which I think should change. Now, what will change are all the tasks that have to be undertaken as the situation develops. Chris, do you want to comment on this a little bit, please?
Yeah, very interesting. And I'll go back to my experience of being gold and silver and bronze.
Yeah.
This is basically the CEO of the company's strategic objective. It should be like this. It should be similar to this for everything that they deal with. And of course, you put them into a bit of an order, and you would put, just as the people here have done on the poll, you would put safety of your staff and visitors number 1, and then you would go down a list of things to be done, and then what follows from that then is the individual actions of the silvers and the bronzes.
Right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple of points here, which I quite like this one. I don't know if either of you have experience of this, but Andrea is asking, how do you deal with a company culture where certain leaders want to play hero in situations like this? Any thoughts on that, guys? Quite an interesting question.
I think you will get people who want to thrust themselves into it. It could be quite dangerous if they're the wrong players, because I think company culture, I often believe is very important for deciding how well a company is going to react and to get through a particular crisis. So, and that I've worked with companies who are where the CEO of the company is somebody that is all dominating, and therefore is surrounded often by sycophants and people like that, and they tend not to be telling the truth. The more open culture we have, where real information is presented without fear, is the one that likes to get through a crisis much better. But often those characters who have got hands like dinner plates and big characters like to take control of it, and it can be actually very, very dangerous, because you really don't have a lot of information. As Chris was saying, there's this massive fog that's going on, and somebody who is very quick to decide on things can get it very wrong if they don't listen properly. And a lot of these people aren't very good listeners. So it's often the wrong person who can push themselves forward. I don't know what you think about that, Chris. What's your experience?
Yeah, and again, going back to my experience, sometimes if you are silver, the last thing you want hanging about you or in the control room when an incident is actually gold, who's taking over the role of silver. So you do need to understand as well that businesses are different, and some. I mean, I spoke to one guy who was head of security for one of the top companies in the country, and he went to the first board meeting, and he was told this company is a risk-taking company. Well, that's all very well in sales, but it's not all right when you're trying to save people's lives. So it is about having the practiced methods of dealing with different situations that will bring you through this. And that's why doing these sort of things is really important.
Okay, good. Just a comment from Kevin here. Strategic objectives at our bank, they're a combination of objectives in order of priorities, which is to protect staff safety. Secondly, keep communication open within the stakeholders and to protect the business of the priorities. So there's a sort of checklist that they have at their bank. Not sure what that bank is that they have there. Okay, let's move on, folks, and we've got some more injects for you. Hopefully you can see this. Situation is developing somewhat. And from the comms team, oh, someone already asked, has gold been invoked by now? I mean, I know we're rushing through this, and I'm guessing that if you had this kind of information, gold would ultimately be invoked, but not in quite the time. We're obviously having to compress the time scale right now. So from comms, there's a lot of unrest and concern among staff, both those at the office and those working from home. Many want to know what's going on and whether their colleagues are safe. We need to put out a message to our people and what should we say. Obviously very important to keep staff informed. Then from security, there were some very scared people outside the building asking to come in, but police are saying not to open doors as they might be terrorists. But what do you do if you see a member of staff you know outside the door? Do you keep them locked out or do you let them in? It's a question. From comms, just seen a City of London police tweet saying 2 gunmen seen running along Princes Street. That's the street you remember leading up from the Bank of England up to your offices. Police were advising everyone to get off the street and stay inside away from windows. So there's the situation now, and I've got another poll for you, and this is one about building lockdown this time. I don't know how Chris has quite a bit to say on this, but what do you go for in a situation like that? The terrorists are quite close to you now, so do you do total lockdown, no one in or out? Do you allow access to people you recognize, as I just mentioned, or perhaps a partial lockdown, emergency or urgent business access only, or no lockdown at all? So I'm going to put up this this one here. Here we go. Yeah, okay, launch poll. There we go. So if you could vote on this, but what about building lockdown? And once you've voted, we'll have a discussion about that as well. Okay, here we've got some more, quite a few questions bubbling in now. So where are we? Yeah, people are voting. Okay, 65%. If you keep voting, please. If you keep voting, we normally seem to get up to about 85%, so we're up to 76. Anybody else want to vote on this, on building lockdown? Where you should go? Okay, I'm going to close the poll now, and I'm going to launch the results. There we go. And Chris, I think I'm going to go to you first. Can you see the results, Chris?
Yes, I can, and each one of those brings a set of problems, which I think you need. And this is, this is the thing that that the companies need to do. Go and work out how you would do this. How would you have a total lockdown? How would you allow access to people you recognise? And all these things, if you've never practiced them, they definitely will not work.
Yeah. Okay, good. Richard, do you have anything to comment on building lockdown?
No, I think the problem is going for the partial ones is that it's very difficult, and unless you've actually rehearsed it all, as Chris has said, and you have a set of rules, because ambiguity of instructions is very different. That's where you're likely to make mistakes. So, a total lockdown, no one in or out, is a very clear instruction. I think if you're going to have other protocols which are about whether security staff can recognize someone's badge and let them in, then it's got to be rehearsed and well trained and well drilled for you to be able to do that. Certainly any last minute ambiguity in an instruction that hasn't been rehearsed is likely to just cause confusion. So I can certainly see the case and the difficulties of all of those things, and as Chris says, rehearsal is the only solution for this.
I mean,
James, and actually able to do it Jim, as well. Sorry, you know, having security guards, enough security guards to lock all your doors, actually empowering them to, you know, lock out the CEO if you have to. These are difficult things to do, and particularly when individual businesses within your building may have different sorts of plans, and some may be telling people to leave and others to stay. So it's a very difficult situation.
I mean, thanks for that, both of you. James makes a very, I mean, it's a sad point, but it's a very good point, that at the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris, colleagues let some of the attackers in. So, you know, this is you know, it's not just notional about this. It actually can happen. And what else? And Julian is saying, you have a duty of care to staff. Would you really not let staff in with terrorists running about outside? Well, that sets it up perfectly, because it did happen with Charlie Hebdo. But if you can actually see a member of your staff outside, surely you would want to let them in.
And just making a point there on the Charlie Hebdo thing, the person that let them in actually had a gun to their head, so and ended up getting killed themselves. And also a really good example is actually Mumbai, where the terrorists walked in through the doors because the security let them in, and of course we all know what happened as a result of that.
Yeah. And Michael this is quite interesting. Michael is raising the issue of, can you legally keep someone in your building if they really want to go? I don't know. I mean, Richard, have you got any thoughts on that?
That's an interesting one, because I mean, we've had this before, where in multi-tenant buildings, you know, you have, you know, each individual company has their own policies and ways in which they're going to work within the crisis, and they are part of that building. And there is a very moot point about whether, in fact, the security can stop people leaving the building if the company decides to instruct their staff to do that. And this is an area which, again, and whenever you have multi-tenant buildings, these are all the tenants and the building management have to have agreed plans, which often they don't have, and they haven't actually thought through these things. And that's an area where there can be considerable confusion and actually lead to a disaster. Yeah, Chris, you might have a view on that.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, Jim, sorry, the communication between businesses within a building is vital. Who is taking control? Because, as you said about
especially like a multi-tenanted building, for example.
Exactly, and you may have 100 different companies in that building, and they've all got their own plans. So someone centrally has to take responsibility, and key to this is communicate to all of them at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very fundamental point of what our philosophy is in terms of what we do, is to make sure that all of those people are actually able to be communicated and with the right messages, and, you know, in floor by floor if necessary, because, you know, this is there's been loads of incidents where this hasn't happened effectively, and we need to have much smarter communications to people in multi-tenant buildings. And there's going to be a lot more post-COVID, by the way, because multi-tenanted buildings, you know, are more likely to be on the rise.
Okay, Chris, I've got a really tricky question for you here from Andrea, but I feel duty bound to ask it. If a terrorist is inside a building, how do you ensure that the staff and visitors are safe without allowing a terrorist to get through into the back of house areas, for example? Goodness, can you help on that?
Yeah, well, this is the key point. And when we're talking about lockdown, we're really only talking about lockdown when the threat is outside the building. If that threat has then come inside your building, it's the run, hide, tell, run, hide, fight, whichever version you want. But of course, if you want people to hide in your building, you need to have places for them to hide. So that's another whole subject. But understand that really the lockdown piece is when the terrorist or the criminal is outside the building. If you've managed to lock your doors and keep people in, that's great. But if they've got in, then it becomes run, hide, tell, and you've got to have a communication method to let people know that's happening.
Okay, good. This an interesting point we've just got from Matthew as well. I'm based in an American university based in the Middle East, and we are constantly consider the risk of an active shooter. consideration of the fire alarm system, releasing the building lockdown system, becomes a consideration for us, especially with students who are given education which tells them that the system does allow the door release when the fire alarm is activated. I must admit, I need a bit more information on that to understand it. But as we know, particularly
we understand.
Sorry, Richard, go ahead.
I think we understand that. I think there is this. First of all, it's not an uncommon method for, and Chris will comment on this, for terrorism to actually use the fire alarm to actually get people to evacuate the building, and that's one thing. But I think they're talking about the fact is that when the fire alarm goes off, the doors automatically open, and therefore, therefore technically anybody, that's a way of, in fact, opening doors for terrorism to enter. That's about actually understanding how the building security works, and for the security to consider that point. But generally speaking, fire alarms are often dangerous elements because only one item, and Chris has talked about, things like moving away from the windows. There are various actions, lockdown. The fire alarm is just telling you to evacuate the building, and very often it is, it can be a false alarm, and therefore, you have to have right protocols to make sure that, and the ability to communicate with people, what is the real actions they should be taking. Chris, you might want to comment on the way that terrorism can use these devices like fire alarms.
Yeah, well, the whole point of fire, your actions in a fire of the building is to clear the building and get them all out on the street. If you're a terrorist, what a great way that is to bring people to a sticky end. And there's lots of examples of where this has been used. I'll give the easiest one was in Bali, where a device was left inside the building, evacuated out to the muster point where the bomb was to kill them. And this has been used over and over again. So most companies will have a fire alarm test every year. That's the one thing you can guarantee to do. So if your only actions, if something's happening, is to go and stand at a muster point, I guarantee you're making things worse. So you must have different methods, different things to do, whether it's lockdown, whether it's evacuation, whether it's run, hide, tell, whatever it is. You need to have those in place and your staff aware of them so that they take the right action, not the wrong.
I think one of the features, Jim, has been, certainly in London, has been the dispersal element as opposed to the muster point that Chris was talking about, and we're very keen on that. And because even if you do that, people go to a Starbucks cafe and then basically they can check in and say they're safe from there, rather than people with a clipboard. We think that for reasons Chris has just said, the idea of people standing on that one piece of grass for a muster point, which incidentally may be actually used by all the adjacent buildings, which isn't probably big enough, is a dangerous issue. And therefore, it's much better that people actually disperse, but you then have to have a means of communicating with them to tell them when it's all clear, when to come back. And that's about communications, which is something which we address. Okay,
all right, excellent. Just got a slide up here. We're coming to the end of the first half of our simulation. What are your most pressing concerns, and what are the big tasks that you think need to be undertaken now? Chris, could I just get some quick thoughts on that from you, please? A quick take.
Well, certainly any terror attack in a city does affect all businesses, actually. And the important thing is that you've thought through some of these issues that we're talking about. You've thought through not only having a plan to evacuate, but having a plan that actually allows you to lock down, empowering your employees as security guards. All those things really are about keeping people safe. And whenever there's a terrorist attack, it is chaos, but keeping people safe and talking to your staff and your customers is really, really important.
Well, that's a good point, and Angela raises this. The technique used at the place I worked at was to use tannoy systems when there was an external threat, and we locked down. The tannoy message included not to evacuate should the alarms activate during lockdown. The auto open of the door was disabled, and fire wardens were activated to monitor. So they obviously had really thought through that that situation there. Okay, now Kevin is saying there has been a question about where to keep the vault key at the bank in the event of a terror attack. And that has been a question at the bank for various months now. So do you have any best practices for what to do in the event of a terror attack and the best practice of where to keep the vault key? Wow, I've never been asked that before. Anybody thoughts on that? The big key for the vault?
I can tell you what's likely to be in the vault, and that's all the crisis management plans.
Well,
Yeah.
they should be using them, Chris. They should be
Well, exactly.
using them.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
the thing is that anything like that is a threat to any member of staff who happens to know where it is, you know, in a terrorist situation like a robbery situation. I think it needs careful consideration. I'm not going to dream up a solution right now, but I think,
I'll tell you what it does bring home to you, though, is actually what is important to individual companies and organizations. It may be intellectual property, it may be a specific thing in a factory or whatever. There are really important things within your business that you need to actually look at, you know, how could we manage if we lost this thing, this physical thing, let alone the people. So how do you put those extra layers of security around that?
Right. All things like that, Jim, are often in your plans, whether it be business continuity plans or anything else. It's in there, and the important thing is that those plans have got to be available to everybody and not, as Chris is saying, locked in the safe. So they need to be available on your mobile device in a secure way. So if you want to know where the vault key is, then the right people will not be able to know about that, and that information can be in there. So access to immediate information in a crisis is really critical.
Angela's come back on this one and says, no heroes, give them the key. Life is more important than assets. But I guess
I like Angela.
You might want. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but you might think about where you want to hide it. I don't know.
But this is another point, actually, Jim, that, you know, we're talking here about terrorist attacks, but actually organized criminals now are really well organized and well funded, and provide a whole new layer of threat. And you know, this is a bank, but there's many other businesses that could get hit by organized, well armed, well funded criminals, and these gangs are out there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. You know, the threat comes in all kinds of forms, I guess. All right. Listen, guys, time is against us, so we need to move on here. Goodness, it really is. So there's a time jump now of 1 hour, and this is our first inject, and things are getting a bit more serious now. This is from security. We've just heard a muffled thud or explosion coming from just outside our offices. Some staff are screaming. From reception, one of the windows in reception has been cracked by an explosion, but otherwise no other damage. 2 of the reception staff are suffering from shock and are being made as comfortable as possible. Both are quite shaken. One is complaining of chest pains. We need medical assistance, and they're saying there's very heavy police presence outside. A tweet from City of London Police: there's an ongoing serious incident. Get off the street, take cover. If you're in an office, remain inside. Do not use public transport. Run, hide, tell. Here's the map again, which contains a bit more information for you, in fact. So there's the original down at Bank. There's 3 men emerged from Bank Tube Station, but now we know, you see at the top there, Buzz Worldwide HQ, an explosion as a terrorist has detonated a suicide vest just outside your offices at Buzz Worldwide. And I have a now fuller update from you. This is a breaking news story. An explosion has ripped through the City of London after a gunman detonated a suicide vest. The man who died instantly was intercepted by police as he was running along Gresham Street next to Coleman Street, which is obviously right by Buzz HQ. 2 police officers who were trying to apprehend him were severely injured in the explosion. At least 6 people have been killed and around 20 injured during the attack. The wounded have been taken to the Royal London Hospital. Earlier, police shot and killed another gunman at Bank Station. A 3rd terrorist is still on the run. While no group has claimed responsibility for the attack, there are suggestions the terrorists are linked to a militant environmentalist group who set out to target oil and gas giant Buzz Worldwide. The firm's HQ on Gresham Street sustained minor damage as a result of the blast. Okay, there. if you can get across that information, I'm going to launch my next poll. But so obviously a terrorist has detonated a suicide vest outside Buzz HQ. 2 police officers have been severely injured in the explosion. 1 terrorist still on the run. Now, we're going to turn to comms now. I know there will be lots of other pressing things for you to do, but I want you to think about what you would do as regards comms. So here's my poll, my latest poll for you, which I think I'll just go ahead and launch actually before I read it out. Okay, there we go. There's your poll. So what's the most pressing? Should you release a press statement? Should you send a memo to staff to stay away from the HQ? Should you contact the regulator? Should you release a statement reassuring customers? Or should you give an update to staff working from home? Now, once again, I'm fully aware that you may want to do several of these, but which is the most important one? Which is the most pressing comms task that you have right now? And people are voting. We have 50% of voters there. So please, if you want to vote, okay, anybody else want to vote, or am I going to? Yeah, we're still getting some votes in. All right, last chance, folks, because time is against us. Are we going to get up to 80? Yeah, we got up. 80 seems to be our sweet spot there. So I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to share results. And there we are. So we got 15% release a press statement, but by far the majority at 78% send a memo to staff to stay away from the HQ. Richard, any comments on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's too early to talk to the press, and the press, of course, will be full of the terrorism attack, and you really don't want to get yourself too prominent there. Remember, these days, all staff are publishers. They all have a Twitter account or a Facebook account and things. So the day of sort of trying to keep things fairly tight within a crisis team of what's happening is long gone. We need to actually make sure that all of our staff, who will be very concerned, they'll be getting news reports, etc., on Buzz worldwide, and they need to know from a trusted source what is actually happening. So that reassures them. That means that they can then reassure their network. So without doubt, for me, getting the staff, of which a lot of them are working from home, informed is the #1 priority. Fully agree with the outcome of that poll.
Yeah, just before I ask you, Chris, I think absolutely, and I think it's in a situation like this, sometimes people forget about internal communications, particularly in big companies, and particularly now with coronavirus, with the pandemic, with people working from all over the place. I think people become very nervous and frightened, not surprisingly, in a situation like this. So keeping your staff informed about what is going on. So because if staff are just getting information from the news media, that's always going to be somewhat more sensationalist. So you need good, dispassionate information from the company involved. Chris, any thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, very quickly. You'll remember back in a couple of years ago now, Oxford Street, Oxford Circus, where two blokes basically having a bit of a punch up on the train platform ended up with Ollie Murs tweeting out and causing absolute chaos to the whole area. And if you're not monitoring those Twitter handles and what's going on in your area, if you're not aware of those things, some of your staff will be. I've spoken to a couple of clients at that stage, and they were saying that they had hundreds of messages coming in on WhatsApp and into the company asking what's going on and commenting, which completely blocked up all the channels that they could speak to people on. So there's a few questions I would throw in here. Where are your staff at the moment? Does anyone got any idea? What do you want them to do? And how are you going to inform them? Have you got a method of fast, quick two-way communication that allows them to get the message and get a message back if they're in danger?
Indeed, two-way mass notification. Got an interesting point from Michael from the Netherlands. He says our experience, the Utrecht tram shooter in the Netherlands, was that it took quite some time to get information from the authorities. Chris, I better put that one to you, I guess. Are the police slow in getting information out? I'm sure you're going to say they're not.
Extremely slow, because they will only put out stuff that's accurate. You see, they will just say that there's an incident ongoing. They don't want to say whether there's people with a gun or people with a bomb. You know, this scenario that we're given here is a little bit unrealistic, because you're getting far more information than you'll ever get in real life. So this is why it's incumbent on companies to kind of work out what's going on and to have the plans in their back pocket. And someone mentioned SOPs earlier. That's brilliant. You know, SOPs are great, but have you actually got SOPs for your security guards? Have they ever practiced them? And what they, you know, how are they going to read them? You know, what they've got seconds to make these decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Jim,
Yeah,
I just
Richard, please.
Some point is that we all know the spectrum of human beings and the staff, etc., their ability to do critical thinking, and we can see from what actually is happening on social media is that there's a whole bunch of people who aren't good at critical thinking, and they follow trends which are sometimes completely crackpot ideas. But amongst them, there will be our staff and other people. So it's very important for the company as a trusted source to do some of that critical thinking for people and to distill the information that will be not necessarily available from the police source, which, as Chris is saying, they're only going to be putting stuff out they actually know, and they'll have to confirm all that. So the company needs to have a plan of how they're actually going to be distilling the information that will often be coming from social media and picking those from trusted sources for people to make sure that they're distilling it and communicating it to their staff very rapidly. It's a really important role the company's got to do to make sure that people keep their feet on the ground.
Thank you, Richard. Just picking up on something that Ian says here, which is Twitter is a faster media source than BBC and Sky. And of course it is. And the point I would make about that is, of course, you don't know how accurate the information you're going to get from Twitter is. But having said that, as a former journalist, and I have a lot of friends who are current journalists, if they're on a breaking story, you can bet your life they're on their Twitter feed looking, and trying to find someone who is actually at the scene and trying to talk to them. So Twitter, social media does have a role to play here. Got a bunch of other questions coming in here, which I'd quite like to look. Oh, I get told off by Catherine. Yes, I was led astray by send memo. Very old fashioned. Oh dear, I'm giving my age away there.
Yeah, I should have put pillow. Yeah.
What's that?
I should have picked you up on that, Jim. I let it go.
You see, I'm just showing my age, aren't I? And Ian is also talking about Twitter videos. Of course, people will share videos that everybody has a camera. Everybody's a citizen journalist these days. Okay, that's great. All right, good, folks. Where are we? Yes, we've got to move. So here we go. We've got some more in now. Yeah, here we go. So we're on to kind of social media now, and I do take your point, Chris, that it is slightly unrealistic, this simulation, that it would never be squeezed like this. But we only have an hour, and I want to give as much information as I can to our listeners. So Twitter is alive with claims that eco-terrorists are targeting Buzz worldwide. Sample of recent tweets: Buzz catching what they deserve from Extinction Rebellion, Buzz causing climate change and now puts us at risk from terrorists. And of course, comms are saying, news organizations are going to be all over this, and they're going to want a comment from Buzz as to why they're the targets. And here's an interesting one. I just threw this in, a bit of a curveball here. HR are saying we've seen tweets suggesting Buzz Worldwide staffer David Markham has been shot by a gunman. We don't know whether this is true, and if it is, what condition he's in. Have you heard from him? Should we let his family know? A difficult thing for senior management to deal with that one. And moving on from sales, what do we tell our clients about being attacked? Some are very jittery about being associated with us. What do we say? And obviously HR is saying we're getting many calls from people's families and staff who are working remotely, who have seen the news and want to know what's going on. So you're going to need to, I think we've talked about this a little bit, about, get out a company-wide statement as to what is going on. All right, well, I'm going to draw this to a conclusion now. That's all the injects that I've got for you. So what I want to do now is look, and I'm very happy to get input from our listeners as well. But what are your priorities now? All right, account for staff and so forth. But give me some other ideas about what tasks you would need to be undertaking now, and what would be your current top task. What would be the most important thing to be doing? And once we've discussed that, we need to think, I always think at the end of an exercise, it's really beneficial to think about how we would, handle this situation over the following day, over the following week. Our company has been attacked by terrorists. Obviously, there's a lot of blowback from that, reputational risk and so forth. How do we deal with that? So I think, Richard, can I start with you first, please? What are your priorities now? What are the tasks that you would consider undertaking now as a chief executive?
Well, Jim, we've just discovered that we are, I wouldn't say definitely the target, but probably the target. The fact is that there's that, and this is the thing that the ambiguity in these cases is part of the problem for anybody running a crisis. It's not necessarily always clear cut, but we now have a probability that this could be the reason for the attack. And so what you're normally desperate for is facts, okay? So we want to know much more, all right? So we now have a rather important issue to say that this could be eco-terrorism against us. So the first thing is, before we start talking with the media in any major way, is that we drill down into understanding what is the data on the Niger Delta issues, what are the things, and rapidly, my tasks would be, I want to know as much about this organization, about what happened, what issues, etc., as the first priorities here, because suddenly we are the target, right? And we're already covering the fact that we're looking after staff and communicating staff, but now suddenly the whole game has changed and we need to know how we're going to respond. Therefore, as many facts as we can as possible. You're never going to know everything. And I think that's the thing about crisis, is that and you talk about who leads the crisis things. That's often not maybe the CEO or the management, etc., because some people get to the top of companies by making careful decisions that have loads of information available, really good decisions over time. But often you're making decisions with incomplete information here very quickly, and some people are better at tasks at that than others. So what we'd be doing now is assembling the right sort of team that can handle this communication going forward, if we hadn't already planned for it. But it may need some tweaking now, because we realize that we're the ones under attack. But before they even start talking, we need to know as much as we can in the fastest possible way. That's what my priorities would be.
And great, Rich, thank you. And I'd just like to add something to that, which Michael has said. Do we have other sites or locations that may be targeted? That's a very good point. It may, they may be trying. Yeah, okay, good. Just Chris, before I come to you, there's quite a few things coming here which I'd just like to share with you. Andrea is saying the most important thing is to get a clear message out to staff on what to do and what is happening with the company at this point to help allay fears. That's a good point. And a similar point made by Gary: ongoing support for colleagues on site who are at risk, continuing updates on comms to colleagues, customers, and the press. I think someone else makes that point. Oh, well, here's a question from Andrea. When would you launch your BC plans? Well, it's right away, no?
Chris. Well, it's important to know the difference between your crisis plan, what you do at the time of the incident, and then when you start implementing your business continuity plans, which are slightly more long term, could go on for years if you've had a big attack.
Okay, okay. Quite an interesting point here from Gary. He says, with COVID and working from home, are you seeing companies moving to a more virtual or remote format for crisis management? What are some enablers and challenges in this? I mean, that's a big question. That actually, Gary, we could run a whole webinar on that, I think.
And I don't think businesses have done this yet, Jim. That's the key point. They've not They've not given thought to the fact that they've got all their people working at home at different locations. They've got them in cafes where they could be viewed by other people. There's so many issues. You know, the business world always changes, but the last 20 years, it's changed dramatically with social media. Your comms team are going to be overflowing with information, and 70% of it will be rubbish. They've got to weed out the bad stuff in order to get to the good stuff. You know, evidence tells us that the companies that use WhatsApp as an example for their crisis management solution, well, it doesn't work because it's overloaded. So you've got to be aware of this stuff and the changes that are coming very quickly. And one of the key points here today is the multi-tenanted offices that we've seen in the past. Well, they're going to be multi-tenanted now because companies are going to reduce the number of office desks, and then floors are going to be split up, and they're going to be, so there's going to be even more complication to this that companies really need to think through.
Yeah, I think this is great, and I want to run a webinar on this. I think we all need to think about this, about how crisis management, business continuity is changing in the face of the pandemic, because I think we can all agree, whilst the vaccine may come along and some of us go back to working in offices, I don't think everybody's going to go back to work in offices 5 days a week, 8 hours a day.
The future is hybrid, and that means that the issue with that is then you've got to say is where are the staff, and that the chances of your crisis management team is going to be atomized in different locations, and certainly probably not likely to get to a traditional crisis room. So we're talking about having to make sure that we've got all the capabilities and running a crisis completely where everybody's in a remote location. And that needs a really good think through of how that works. And, you know, life has just suddenly changed in this sort of 6 months, and we have got to address it, and all companies have got to address it.
Yeah, if I could just come back to my questions, and this is a question for everyone that's listening in here. You know, at any given moment, where are your staff? If you've got any idea where your staff are, and if something happens, what do you want them to do in any given scenario? And if you haven't thought that through, then really you need to. And also, how are you going to tell them? How are you going to communicate with them about what you want and how you want it to happen? And how are they going to let you know that they've done it or they haven't? Yeah, it really, indeed. You know, it comes back to those simple things. And if you haven't got a system to do that, then really you need to start thinking about it.
And be prepared for hybrid attacks, terrorism and cyber combined, which is going to take out your comms as well. That's something which.
Thanks for that one, Richard.
Just throw that nice happy thought into the game.
I'm going to have to call I can't believe we're there, but I'm going to call a halt. But just with one thing, because I asked about what we should be doing over the coming days and weeks, and Charlotte has commented on this, and it's good. Consideration for the following week: who needs medical support, who needs emotional support, which functions are able to continue as business as usual, and who left their laptop in the building. This should be split out to different streams for different people to manage. That's great, guys. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off here because we have our allotted hour, but Richard and Chris, thank you so much for your insights here. It's been really interesting. The hour has gone by in a moment. We've had loads of questions, so thank you so much for that. We're going to be running another simulation in December, and I'm just not simulation, another webinar in December, and I'm really minded to look at this idea of how BC is crisis management is changing in the wake of COVID. But thank you very much, guys. I'm going to sign off now, and we'll see you all again next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.